Imagine this. You wake up, you check your phone, you look at your bank account, and nothing looks catastrophic, nothing looks broken, you're not in debt crisis, you're not completely out of money. But there's this constant pressure sitting quietly in the background of your life, this feeling that everything is just a little too expensive, that no matter how much you earn, it never feels like enough, like every month is slightly tighter than it should be. Like you're always adjusting, always calculating, always holding back just a little bit. And over time, that feeling becomes normal. It becomes your default state. You stop questioning it, you start accepting that life is just expensive, that this is how it is for everyone. But what if that feeling isn't normal? What if it's not just the cost of living? What if it's the result of a system of small decisions, habits, and invisible pressures that slowly push your lifestyle higher and higher without you even noticing it? Because here's the truth, most people never realize your life doesn't suddenly become expensive overnight. It happens gradually, almost invisibly, one upgrade at a time. One small improvement, one small convenience, one small "I can afford this" decision. And each of those decisions feels justified in the moment. It feels earned. It feels reasonable. But they don't stay isolated. They stack. They build on each other. And before you realize it, your entire baseline has shifted. What used to feel like a luxury now feels like a necessity. What used to be optional now feels required. And that's where the trap begins. Because once your lifestyle expands, it rarely goes backwards. Your brain adapts quickly to comfort, to convenience, to better options. And once it adapts, it resists giving them up. So even if your income increases, your expenses quietly follow, matching it step by step, keeping you in the same position, just at a higher level. And this is why people who earn more don't always feel richer, because their lifestyle has expanded at the same speed as their income, sometimes even faster. And the most dangerous part is that it feels like progress. It feels like success. You're living better. You're upgrading things, you're improving your environment, but at the same time, you're locking yourself into a higher cost of living that requires more and more money just to maintain. And that creates pressure. Constant pressure, because now your survival depends on sustaining that level. You can't easily step back. You can't easily reduce because everything around you has been calibrated to that new standard. And this is where people start to feel stuck, because even though they're earning more, even though they're doing better on paper, their freedom hasn't increased. Their flexibility hasn't improved. In some cases, it's even worse, because now they have more to lose, more to maintain, more to protect. And that pressure shows up in subtle ways, in stress, in hesitation, in the feeling that you can't slow down, that you always need to keep going, keep earning, keep pushing, because if you don't, everything starts to fall apart. And what's interesting is that this doesn't come from one big decision. It comes from dozens of small ones, choosing convenience over effort, choosing speed over cost, choosing comfort over discipline, again and again, until those choices define your lifestyle. And once they do, they become invisible. They feel normal. You stop noticing how often you're choosing the more expensive option, how often you're paying for time, for ease, for simplicity. And none of these choices are wrong on their own. That's what makes this so tricky. They're reasonable, they're understandable, they make sense in isolation, but together they create a system that constantly pulls your money away from you. And because it's not one big expense, because it's spread out across your entire life, it's hard to see, it's hard to measure, and that's why most people don't fix it. They don't even realize it's happening. They just feel the result. They feel the pressure, the tightness, the sense that something isn't adding up, but they can't point to a single cause. And that's because the cause is everywhere. It's built into your routine, your habits, your environment, your expectations. And once you understand that, once you see how your lifestyle has been shaped over time, you start to realize that the solution is not just to earn more,
It's to become aware of how your standards have shifted, how your definition of normal has changed, and whether that new normal is actually serving you or quietly holding you back. Because the truth is, you don't need to eliminate everything. You don't need to live extremely or cut out every comfort, but you do need to recognize what is actually adding value to your life and what is simply maintaining a level of comfort that you become used to. And once you make that distinction, once you separate real value from privichka, you gain control. You start
making decisions more consciously, not automatically, and that changes everything, because now your lifestyle doesn't expand without your permission. Now you decide what stays and what goes, what is worth the cost and what isn't, and that's how you start to break out of the feeling that life is always too expensive, not by fighting reality, but by understanding how your own behavior has shaped it and choosing to reshape it in a way that actually works for you. And as you begin to do that, something shifts. The pressure
starts to decrease. Not instantly, not dramatically, but gradually, because you're no longer constantly pushing your expenses upward without realizing it. You're stabilizing, you're creating space, and that space gives you options. It gives you breathing room. It gives you the ability to save, to invest, to think long-term instead of just reacting to the present. And that's where real financial progress begins. Not when you suddenly earn more, but when you stop letting your lifestyle grow unchecked and start aligning it with what actually matters to you. And that alignment is what turns money from a constant source of stress
into a tool that supports your life instead of controlling it. But to fully understand this, you have to go even deeper. Because lifestyle inflation is not just about spending more. It's about identity. It's about how you see yourself and how you want others to see you. It's about the subtle pressure to keep up, to match the people around you, to not feel like you're falling behind. And this pressure is everywhere. It's in social media. It's in your accrusion. It's in the expectations you absorb without even realizing it. And over time, those expectations shape your behavior. They influence your decisions. They make certain upgrades feel necessary, even when they're not. And because everyone around you is doing the same thing, it reinforces the idea that this is normal, that this is just how life is.
works, but when you step back and really look at it, you start to see the pattern. You start to see how these invisible forces are guiding your choices. And once you see it, you have a choice. You can continue following that path automatically, or you can start questioning it. Start deciding for yourself what actually matters, what actually improves your life in a meaningful way, and what is simply noise, simply pressure, simply expectation disguised as necessity. And that awareness is powerful because it gives you the ability to step out of the loop, to stop chasing a constantly moving standard, and instead build a lifestyle that is stable, intentional, and sustainable. And when you do that, something surprising happens.
You don't feel deprived. You don't feel like you're missing out. You feel more in control, more focused, more aligned, because your money is no longer being pulled in every direction, it's being directed by you. And that changes your entire experience of finances, because instead of constantly feeling like life is expensive, you start to feel like you're in charge of how expensive your life becomes. And that shift, that simple shift in perspective and behavior is what allows you to finally move forward instead of staying stuck in the same place no matter how much you earn. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about how much money you make, it's about how your lifestyle evolves around it, and whether that evolution is intentional or automatic. Because if it's automatic, it will always outpace your income. But if it's intentional, it becomes something you can control, shape, and use to your advantage over time. And that's the difference between feeling like life is always too expensive and actually building a life that you can afford, sustain, and enjoy without constant pressure. And if you look at this from a more scientific and psychological perspective, what's happening here is not random at all.
It follows very predictable patterns of human behavior because your brain is constantly adapting to new levels of comfort through something called hedonic adaptation, which simply means that any improvement in your lifestyle quickly becomes your new normal. And once it becomes normal, it no longer feels special. It no longer gives you the same level of satisfaction, so you naturally start looking for the next upgrade, the next improvement, the next level of convenience. And this creates a cycle where your expectations keep rising without you consciously deciding for them to rise. And at the same time, your perception of basic needs quietly expands. What used to be optional now feels required. And that shift happens so gradually that you don't notice it in real time, but over months and years, it completely changes how expensive your life feels. And there's another layer to this, which is decision fatigue, because every day you make dozens, sometimes hundreds of small decisions, and as your mental energy decreases throughout the day, your brain starts defaulting to the easiest available option. And in modern life, the easiest option is almost always the more expensive one. Ordering instead of cooking, paying for speed instead of waiting, choosing convenience instead of effort. And this is not because you're making bad decisions, it's because your brain is optimizing for efficiency and energy preservation, which made sense in an evolutionary context, but in a modern financial environment, it often leads to higher spending. And when you combine hedonic adaptation with decision fatigue, you get a powerful system that continuously pushes your lifestyle upward while making it feel normal and justified at every step. And on top of that, there is social proof, the psychological tendency to look at others to determine what is appropriate or expected. And when you constantly see people around you or online living at a certain standard, your brain interprets that as the baseline, even if it's not realistic or sustainable. And this influences your spending decisions in subtle ways, making certain purchases feel necessary just to maintain a sense of belonging or progress. And when all of these factors work together, adaptation, fatigue, and social influence, they create a feedback loop where your lifestyle keeps expanding while your awareness stays limited. And that's why it feels like life is always expensive, because from your perspective, you're just maintaining a normal standard. But in reality, that standard has been moving upward the entire time. And understanding this is important because it shifts the problem from something emotional to something structural. It's not that you lack discipline or control, it's that you're operating inside a system that is designed, both psychologically and socially, to increase your spending over time. And once you see it that way, the solution becomes clearer. It's not about trying to fight your instincts or completely eliminate comfort. It's about designing your environment and your habits in a way that reduces these pressures. For example, by limiting unnecessary choices, by setting default behaviors that align with your goals, by creating friction for spending and removing friction for saving. And these small structural changes work with your brain instead of against it, making it easier to maintain control without constant effort. And over time, this approach leads to a very different outcome, because instead of your lifestyle expanding automatically, it stabilizes. It becomes intentional. And that stability is what allows your income to actually create progress instead of just supporting a constantly rising baseline. And when that happens, when your expenses stop chasing your income, you finally start to experience what financial growth actually feels like. Not just earning more, but keeping more, building more, and having the freedom that comes with it. And that's when the feeling of life being too expensive begins to fade. Not because the world changed, but because you changed the way you interact with it, in a way that is grounded in understanding, awareness, and systems that support you, instead of silently working against you.
Hello,
That's
everyone.
all.
Welcome to the
Subscribe
team.
and
I'm
like,
thrilled
and
to
I
have
will
you on
post
board.
even more
Let's achieve
interesting
great
and
things
useful
together.
videos about finance.